Paul Bucher, the former prosecutor and now defense attorney, joins us live on the phone. Mr. Bucher, your initial reactions to hear this verdict?
Good afternoon. Well, I'm not surprised. It's a sad, terrible situation for the family, and obviously all of our thoughts are with them, but I also understand the legality of it. And I think District Attorney Chisholm was just trying to split this hair a little bit too thin. To concede, in essence, the first shot was self-defense, but the second was not, I think was the downfall of this case. It either is self-defense or not self-defense when you're talking about 1.3 seconds or something like that. And I think the video really made it clear to the jurors, I guess, who knows what they were thinking, that the officer, it happened so fast, and that the officer doesn't have time to react. And he saw the gun and he fired, and you really don't have time to register what happened after that first shot and you fire again. I'm not so sure I buy into the rhetoric of the second weapon. I just think it was a natural reaction when you see the gun. It's the boom boom in it, and it's done, unfortunately. So I wasn't too surprised, actually, and I think that's maybe what the jury was trying to decide.
Paul Bucher, a former Waukesha County District Attorney and now in private practice. Paul, this is Mike Strehlow here. Do you believe that perhaps Heaggan Brown was overcharged? Do you believe that there should have been a more appropriate charge in this case, that perhaps District Attorney Chisholm went a little bit too high in going with first-degree reckless?
Well, I never second-guess or try to criticize a prosecutor, having been there for 28 years myself. I'm sure he had reasons to charge this case. I was a little surprised that he would charge it, conceding that, the first shot was self-defense. It would be a different scenario, of course, if you have a shot and he jumps the fence and he's running away and the gun is laying there on the ground and then there's a second shot. But I was just a little surprised. I'm not going to say it was an overcharge, but I'm a little surprised that it was charged at all with the split-second timing between the two shots. And the fact that he was armed, it doesn't reduce the tragedy, but self-defense is not as easy as many people think. It's really a subjective, objective prong that are comprised in self-defense. So what was the officer thinking, and what would a reasonable officer in that situation do or be thinking? And I believe any reasonable officer in that situation, tragically, probably would have done the same thing.
What do you make, Paul, of the jury asking this morning, could they hear audio of the body camera video? Does it really change what an officer says during these incidents? Don't you have to just go by what you see alone?
No. When I would review officer shootings, and I reviewed many fatal officer shootings, I would always ask the officer, and I always would gather, what did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? Let me hear the radio traffic. What were the other officers saying? What was the suspect saying? Was it recorded? I would rely on everything the officer could have perceived from any of his or her senses. So, for instance, if the victim in this case would have said, "I don't have the gun, don't shoot," that could be a factor. So, I think that everything is important when you're trying to determine what's in that officer's mind, subjectively, and then objectively whether or not the use of deadly force is reasonable.
All right, Paul, we're going to ask you to just stand by, please, for a moment as we look live outside the courthouse.
Exactly, and we want to check in with CBS 58's Evan Krugel, who covered this trial from the beginning. Evan, what do you know outside there, please?
Well, certainly some emotional moments inside the courtroom this afternoon. Our cameras throughout this trial were not allowed to show the gallery or the jurors, so the best I can do is paint you a picture of what happened this afternoon. Now, there were about 20 members of Smith's family in the gallery, only about 4 for Heaggan Brown. And as that verdict came down, Smith's family rose, a bunch of them yelled, and they then exited the courtroom at that point. Heaggan Brown's family, I mentioned only 3 or 4 of them, they shouted, they cheered a little bit, and then they sat down. That is when the judge asked the jury to be pulled from the room because of the outburst from Smith's family. We followed them out of the room, and we were told they would be speaking over here at some point this afternoon. We don't see them here right now. But I spoke with Slyville Smith's brother this morning. He told me he woke up at about 3 a.m. He did not sleep well, and that he had a bad feeling about this afternoon. So certainly rough moments for that family as this verdict came down. As of now, not sure when or where they will be speaking.
Well, we're looking live now. Lindsay Branwall, Craig Stern, our chief photographer, both out there with a full group of supporters from CBS 58 News to monitor the situation here. Our attention is drawn to some activity that is occurring outside the courthouse. It was in the opposite direction of where we were positioned. We now see that police have been setting up some type of position here as we zoom in, and we do see.
Pass out or nothing like that. Come on, man, cut the cameras off. Stop it. Stop it.
Understandably, a moment of grief. I think Paul Bucher said it best. I mean, this family is still dealing with the tragedy, regardless of how you feel about the verdict. And those were, in fact, family members and friends of Slyville Smith, the young man who was killed by Dominique Heaggan Brown, and obviously a very tense situation. So we will try to do our best to not be invasive, but to give you, the viewer, a sense of what is going on at the courthouse. Police obviously prepared for whatever might arise here, and actually I think was shielding the family and trying to assist the family. Apparently somebody is not feeling well, fell ill. And right out here outside the courthouse, shortly after Dominique Heaggan Brown was found not guilty of shooting Slyville Smith.
And you can see right here a number of family members surrounding someone who is on their knee right now, just trying to gather themselves. Very, very emotional, and police there, understandably so, to make sure that they are not crowded around. And we certainly want to keep a very respectful distance to that, but also provide for you, the aftermath of this verdict. Paul Bucher, are you still on the line with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, Paul, we're watching live video right now, but of course this case focused so much on body camera video. How is that going to affect how cases move forward? Body cameras were brought into police departments in order to build public trust, in order to provide accountability. Do you feel that they are working at this point so far?
I do, and they're omnipresent right now. They're everywhere, and in every case I review, from a speeding case to a homicide case that I have, everybody has their body cam or they have a squad cam, and that's the nature of the business now. Is when I get police reports of discovery, I'll get 6, 7, 8 different discs that have the recording of the body cam or the squad cam. I think it will hold everybody accountable, and also is good for individuals who claim innocence to be able to look at that videotape. But they have to understand and hopefully have the guidance as to what they're seeing, not what they want to see. And oftentimes, in this case, what they saw was very tragic, and I can't imagine what the family was going through. But it really documented exactly what was happening and what's going through that particular officer's mind. And the bottom line is, and I hate to say this, but under the law in Wisconsin, you don't have to be right when you use self-defense. You have to be reasonable. And that's a crucial distinction. And I would teach that often. You don't have to be right. You have to be reasonable. And that's a crucial distinction for families. That's a crucial distinction for officers and for citizens now that we have concealed carry.
Naturally, though, Paul, people will make the argument a drug offense is not punishable by death penalty in this country. So a lot of people have problems bringing that balance to their mind. How do we create an understanding in the community of this?
Well, it's not the offense, whether it was a drug offense or a sex offense or an eluding offense or whatever it is. It's the presence of the firearm, which generates a subjective and objective belief in the officer's mind that I have to use deadly force. I don't think any individual wants to use deadly force, officer or civilian. But if you believe, and it's a reasonable belief, that is the only alternative you have available to stop imminent bodily harm or death to yourself or another, you're privileged to use that. Whether you're a police officer, there aren't special rules that apply for police officers. Whether you're a police officer or you're just Joe Blow in the community, the same rules apply to you. When you're a police officer, of course, it's more highly scrutinized. So it's not the drug offense. We don't have the death penalty, and he wasn't executed because of the drug offense. In this tragic situation, unfortunately, he died from his wounds because of the officer's belief deadly force had to be used, and the jury's agreement that belief on the officer's part was reasonable.
And in this case, the body camera video was shown in court in many different ways, in real time, in slow motion, frame by frame, some people interpreting it one way and others another way, just like, and I don't mean to be insensitive in using this comparison, but instant replay that we see in sports. Some people say, well, wait a minute, this is what it shows, and other people saying no. And so in this case, people were saying it looked as though he was going for a second gun. Others are like, no, he was just falling backwards. So it's not a definitive, we have the body cam video, therefore we can make a decision on exactly what happened.
It helps. When I try cases, I always tell the jury that my goal is to put them at the scene, is to set up a set of bleachers, so to speak, and have them sitting right there and see the case unfold. And that's what body cams do. Again, I don't necessarily buy into the second gun theory, but and I'm not sure the jury did either. But you just really what the body cam does, or the spot cam, it puts the finder of fact, whether it be a jury or a judge, almost at the scene, and allows them to interpret what's being said by the individual who used deadly force.
And
they have to come to the
excuse me, Paul, I just want to explain to our viewers that we are looking at file video of the Sherman Park shooting last year. But please go on, Paul.
It just ultimately allows the jury or the finder of fact to come to the conclusion, was that belief, because a subjective belief is easy to show, you just have to say it, but whether or not that was reasonable. And that body cam really does help. And it's not necessarily always determinative, but it does help a great deal, and will continue to help as we move forward with technology.
Did you have concerns that this was a local jury who was well aware of all the media coverage possibly, of course, the unrest in Sherman Park, the separate sex assault case? Did you worry that it was a local jury as opposed to an outside jury coming in to decide this case?
No, I don't think so. I think rarely that applies. It really, I've had the juries from outside the county, and I've had most of my juries from inside the county. But during the voir dire process, the questioning of the jury, that usually can come out, and I think they can separate out what's happening. And I don't see whether it was an inside jury or outside jury would have made any difference in this case.
How powerful, how effective do you believe the testimony from the defense witness, the use of force expert, Robert Willis, was in this case?
Well, I know Bob. I know him very well, actually. He used to be a New Berlin police officer. And I've used him both as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer for advice and consultation. I'm not sure. I think it gave the jury some idea. Many times what you'll see in cases like this is training officers are put on and they testify as the various levels of force, and I think Bob did that. Or Mr. Willis did that, mere presence and hands-on, etc. So I think he explained to the jury as to some concept, although it was relatively short, as to the use of force. But overall, I really don't think that played into this verdict. It was really what they saw, and what the officer didn't testify and really didn't have to, because I don't think he could add anything to it. It's what he saw, what they saw, and so while Willis was helpful, I don't think it was determinative.
Well, to put Dominique Heaggan on the stand, that would have been a huge error, wouldn't it have, Paul? I mean, it would have opened him up to all the questions about the separate sex assault case, wouldn't it have?
No.
Okay.
But it would have opened him up to some very probing questions by District Attorney Chisholm, who's a good lawyer, as to the second gun theory, and just, you never know when you put your client on the stand what they're going to say. And they may tell you what they're going to say, but once they get on the stand, you can't help them, and it can really be a problem. Everything was there for the jury, and his testimony would not have assisted him in any way, shape, or form, and it definitely had a
All right,
high
excuse us,
potential.
Paul. D.A. John Chisholm is now speaking. Let's listen to what he has to say.
And just express a couple of observations related to really this process that's been going on since August 15th. And that is, as you know, I have always personally taken a strong interest in officer-involved shootings, officer-involved deaths. They are always circumstances that require our full attention from the system. I've also always taken the position that I would take the responsibility for making the decision of whether or not I believe that there was sufficient evidence to prosecute a case if the facts merited that. And this is a case where I felt very strongly that those facts were merited and that the case had to be charged and that it had to be decided by a jury. That's what's happened. You'll often hear prosecutors tell you at the end of a trial in which the trial has not gone the way they want it, that they respect the jury's verdict, they respect the jury's decision. In this case, I want to express my sincere gratitude to the service that the jurors provided. It wasn't easy. They were sequestered. That hasn't been done in this county for a long time, but we wanted them to focus on the facts, focus on the law, and come to a decision to the best of their ability. That's what they've done. I don't have to agree with the decision, but I always have to respect that decision. This is a case that required the closest attention. We gave it that attention. We prosecuted a strong case. We worked closely, and I was tremendously proud of the work that the Wisconsin Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation did. This is not an easy thing for law enforcement agencies to do, is to investigate themselves. They did a professional job. They did a thorough job. They provided my office the information necessary to pursue this case. We pursued it. We pursued it aggressively. We presented a strong case. And once again, this is just an issue that this community had to decide. They've made that decision. I think there's things that we can learn going forward, but the decision has been made, and I respect that. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
What's one of the things you say you've been learning today?
Well, one of the most important things is, as I indicated during the trial, is that accountability is important. Everybody understands, not just in this community, but throughout the country, that the relationship between law enforcement and the justice system and the communities they serve is under some severe strain right now. And one of the issues that allowed us to move forward and provide some more accountability, certainly, came in the form of the body cameras themselves. This is the type of information.
We are going to switch you now to a news conference being held by the attorney for the family of Slyville Smith. Let's listen in.
That's what happened. And that's just the first lie. That's the first response. So this isn't over at all by any means. In fact, this is just a new beginning. And that's the important thing, is that justice will live to fight another day. And this is not over by any means. And we'll see you all in court. This is Patrick, Slyville's father, and Sherelle, his sister. Want to express a little bit?
Yeah, all I want to say is see that verdict that they came up with that hurt another person in my life that I love, my daughter. You know, they already knew that they was going to find him not guilty anyway because they're trying to hide behind shields. And I would like to say too, for us, law is changing, we're not animals. And why is they trained? They keep talking about they trained to kill. Why is they supposed to be trained to kill us when they supposed to be trained to protect and serve us? We're not animals. Every time they take a shot, it's to kill you. It's to kill you because a dead man can't talk, so he can't explain what really happened. So they say, shoot to kill. If you're gonna shoot him, kill him. Why they can't wound him? They shot my son in the arm. It was dead. That was over. He was out of commission. He shot him while he was on his back. He stood there, moved his hand, and shot him in the chest. That's untolerated. And we call them somebody who we supposed to be looking up to and look forward to help us. I'm so scared of the cops. I don't know what to do for us, trying to get behind me and stop me. I don't know where to go. Should I ride to the police station where more of them can shoot me? Or should I pull over to my family house and get gunned down in front of my family? That's how scared I am, because every time you get stopped, license or not, they still got some other reason to get you up out the car. What for? Because it's designed for them to get away with this hideous crime that they just did. It ain't cool. It's very disrespectful. And I see now, there's no justice here.
Cheryl, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say that don't give them a reason to take your life. If you can change it, just try to change it. Stop giving them a reason to take your life. Do something different in the community. Try as hard as you can to be peaceful and form unity with each other, period. Black or white. because we all bleed the same, we all hurt the same, and it don't feel good to lose anybody. So just please, just don't give them a reason. Just if you can walk away or change your life, just please just try to change your life. It's better that you're here to make our community great than not to be here just so we can have to continue to fight, because I don't want to lose nobody else. Family or not family, people matter to me. So please just try to change the way that you think and react.
Mr. Smith, the whole city has been following this case from the beginning. Is there anything you want to say to the community?
I think that, so this has obviously been a big case in Milwaukee, and I think that this is hopefully the opportunity for us to start a conversation about a number of things that led to all of this. A number of things that, why was Officer Heaggan Brown on the street? Why were people in Sherman Park so angry? Who are the jump out boys? Why haven't there been held accountability for officers jumping out of cars and chasing people down? What are some of the other systemic things? And because it doesn't have to be an us versus them attitude, but when communities lack trust because their rights have been systemically violated, then it's hard to even begin the conversation.
And can you tell us what damages, if any, you're seeking with that lawsuit against the city and Mr. Heaggan Brown?
Well, the damages are quite obviously unquantifiable, and only a jury can decide that. You know, there's Slyville Smith had a son who's 3 now, and what's the value of growing up without your father? Only a jury can determine that. And seeing the video, you guys all saw it for the first time this last week. It's shocking. It's startling. It hurts the conscience. It offends human dignity, and only a jury can give a value to that.
Was this filed before the verdict came down?
It was filed around the same time. You know, we respected the district attorney and the prosecutors here and their criminal process, which necessarily precedes the civil one. And so as soon as we learned that was going to be over, we filed our lawsuit.
Mr. Smith, after this happened last year, the community reacted. We all saw what happened. What do you have to say to the community after this verdict?
Be smart.
Well, this verdict means nothing to me, really, because I know the last verdict is God. And they say you're supposed to believe in the unseen, so if you believe in God and you don't see him, and you did not believe what you just seen on that film because he totally shot my son in cold blood and came back not guilty. That's crazy. So I'm wondering now, did the jury ever believe in God? Or do they know God? They can't.
How do you want the community to react?
I really want
Mayor Tom Barrett also now speaking. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Handle this in a very professional fashion, and that's what's important at this time.
Do you think the verdict was correct?
I didn't have a chance to listen to the testimony. Again, I know that this was a very difficult case. There were 2 shots that were fired. I don't think that even the prosecutor argued with the legitimacy of the first shot. It was the second shot, and I think that the timing between the first shot and the second shot probably was a key factor in this trial. But I say that without having seen any of the evidence that they saw in the courtroom.
All right, thank you. What message do you have for young people? I know this was obviously focused on young people, but young people were out protesting.
The message I have for young people is do what you can, stay in school, make sure that your activities are activities that don't put you in harm's way, and really act responsibly. And I'm not saying that to compare that with anybody's actions, but if I were to talk, as I did here with young people, this was a very positive event that we're coming from right here, and we're really trying to focus on the positive for the young people, because for every bad incident that you see on TV or read about, there are 100 good incidents that are not reported, and I want to focus on those good incidents as well. Okay?
Thanks, Mayor.
All right, thank you all very much.
You're watching CBS 58 News special coverage. Former Milwaukee police officer Dominique Heaggan Brown found not guilty of first-degree reckless homicide in the fatal shooting of 23-year-old Slyville Smith in Sherman Park last August.
That verdict came after a little bit more than 9 hours of deliberation, 6 days of testimony, attorneys' arguments, and of course, body camera video shown in many ways and often in court. The counts that Dominique Heaggan Brown. He was charged with first-degree reckless homicide. Guilty, would have faced 60 years maximum prison term. The jury had 3 options to consider that first charge, in which they did, and they found him guilty. Had they not been able to reach a verdict on that first charge, they could have considered 2 lesser charges with maximum punishment of 25 years in prison and 10 years respectively.
Shortly after the reading of the verdict, an outburst in the court, at which time Judge Jeffrey Conan went behind closed doors, and officers surrounded the defense table. The judge waiting for things to settle down. Our crews, Evan Krugel, reporting that the family of Slyville Smith left shortly after that outburst. Our crews then saw outside the courthouse some of that contingent of family and friends. One person actually kneeling down at one point, obviously an emotional scene. Let's go back live to Evan right now, where he can give us a sense of what's going on. Evan?
Well, all is quiet on this side of the building. I can tell you barricades are up at least one entrance to the courthouse, but the majority of the action you were talking about is over on the other side of the courthouse near the public safety building. That's where the Smiths are believed to have exited the building into that courtyard, and certainly an emotional moment in the courtroom this afternoon. This was an interesting trial in the sense that our phones were not allowed inside the courtroom at any time, and our cameras were not allowed to capture the jury or anyone in the gallery. And so when that verdict was read, about 20 of Smith's family members stood up, they yelled, and they left the room. A handful were crying. The Heaggan Brown family, which was much smaller in size, about 3 or 4, they let out a short cheer. And that's when that moment you spoke about earlier happened, where the jury was actually led out of the courtroom while the Smith family cleared out of the gallery.
Judge or DA John Chisholm saying that he respects the jury's verdict. He could have asked for an individual polling of each juror, but decided not to. He said he stands by that he thought he had enough strong evidence to bring charges in this case.
We also heard from former Waukesha County District Attorney Paul Bucher on the telephone, who said that the jury didn't have to find that Heaggan Brown, what Heaggan Brown did was wrong, but rather reasonable, and that was the burden of proof in that, and he felt as though that based on the things that he has heard, that that the verdict was indeed right. Let's listen in now to Mike Crivello,
President of the Milwaukee Police Association.
It's a very difficult situation for the family. We know that. We appreciate that. At the same time, it's a very difficult situation for any officer who finds themselves in a situation like that. On that day, date and time, we had an officer who came to work in uniform, came to work to protect and serve this city. He put himself between good and evil. He was confronted by an armed criminal, and we're all fortunate that he didn't lose an officer. But I'll say it again, it is a very unfortunate situation anytime we lose a citizen to violence in the streets of Milwaukee. From the Milwaukee Police Association, we are absolutely grateful to a mindful jury that took time to deliberate, look at the evidence, and ultimately realize what took place was a necessity born of the actions of a criminal on that day. Pending any questions, that's my statement. Thank you.
We had heard from Slyville Smith's family not too long ago, sending out 2 strong messages. One, that they maintain that they don't believe Slyville Smith should have died, and that they are asking for a re-examination of police training in the state of Wisconsin, now that the jury has accepted the argument that was presented by the defense that when you are armed and you're talking about mere seconds, and as long as your hands are still moving, you are a threat. So the family of Slyville Smith asked for a re-examination not only of police training in Wisconsin, but then said to people out in the community watching, don't do anything that won't get you shot.
It was quite an emotional plea, Michele, from this sister of Slyville Smith especially, a tearful sister who in a sense, was saying, do not let Seville's death go in vain. She believes that this should be a chance for a call for unity. Let's bring people together. She doesn't want to see any more people dying, whether it's a family member or someone that she doesn't know in the city. That there are various ways that people can grow from this, can build from this. As heartbroken as she was, she's certainly trying to focus on the positive and send a message to people in her neighborhood, people in the wider community, that we need to move forward to prevent these kinds of things from happening in the future.
It was then at that point that the Smith family attorney said this is not over. They have waited patiently for the criminal case to wind its way through the state court. They have every intention of filing a civil lawsuit, and we will have to see where that takes the city of Milwaukee next. As you might recall, another high-profile and controversial officer-involved shooting, Dontre Hamilton's family. When Dontre Hamilton was killed in Red Arrow Park, while the officer, Christopher Manny, was cleared of any wrongdoing in that case, the city of Milwaukee still agreed to a substantial settlement with the family.
That settlement, $2.6 million, just happening about 1 month ago. So this case certainly heading in a couple of different directions. The civil lawsuit, but also Dominique Heaggan Brown, while he was found not guilty of this first-degree reckless homicide charge, he is still in custody. He's being held on $100,000 bail in connection with an unrelated sexual assault. And the trial on that case is going to be coming up, I believe, on August 21st. So more proceedings ahead for Dominique Heaggan Brown.
Mayor Tom Barrett keeping up his schedule of appearances this afternoon, but stopping briefly to talk with reporters, saying he wants to continue to attend positive events, showing the community working together, showing young people doing incredible things. And he says that's the message he wants to get across. That's the message he wants to say to the community after a fired Milwaukee police officer was cleared of wrongdoing for last August's fatal shooting of Slyville Smith.
And just to remind you, what you're watching right there was a file video from the day of the shooting.
But let's go live to Lindsay
Yes.
Branwell now. Lindsay has been monitoring the situation outside the courthouse. And Lindsay, what can you tell us?
Mike and Michele, well, we just heard from Mike Crivello, the Milwaukee Police Association president. He stood right here in front of a number of media representatives and talked about a little bit about the difficulties that police face each day when they go out on the job, but ultimately said that they respect the jury's decision in this verdict to find Dominique Heaggan Brown not guilty in the death of Slyville Smith. Then before that, we heard from the Smith family attorney as well as two members from the Smith family. We heard from Patrick Smith, Slyville Smith's father, and we heard from his sister, Sherelle. They made a piece today, a plea for peace, asking the community to do something good, to be peaceful from this. They also talked about this lawsuit that was just filed. Family attorney David Owen says that he waited and wanted to respect the criminal system before they filed this. They said that the damages are priceless. It's Slyville Smith's life, but they are hoping to get some justice going through a civil lawsuit that they said they just filed today. It's in the Eastern District of Wisconsin, the federal court district there, and they just said that they wanted to respect the court and the criminal process first, but after hearing the verdict from the jury finding Dominique Heaggan Brown not guilty in this reckless homicide case, they decided to file this lawsuit and said that they will continue to seek justice in the death of Slyville Smith. Reporting live outside the Milwaukee County Courthouse, Lindsay Branwell, CBS 58 News.
Lindsay, viewers watched this whole incident unfold, the chaos, for lack of a better term, after the verdict. We did see you and your crews walking quite quickly with what seemed to be grieving family members. Can you describe to us what happened immediately outside the courthouse?
Yeah, it was probably 10 minutes after the verdict that was verdict was read that we started seeing traffic file out of the courthouse. Our cameras caught Slyville Smith's family as they were leaving, obviously very distraught. At that point, crowds were gathering from the east entrance. We had shown you a few pictures, and we'd been talking about this since the verdict was read, that the eastern doors of the courthouse were blocked off. There was a pretty large police presence kind of trying to mitigate these crowds or control these crowds. But as those gathered, the family and the lawyer continued to walk away from the chaos, if you would call it that, to come here and address the media, to take a moment to grieve before they walked up to our microphones. It was visible. You could see Slyville Smith having a difficult time, tearing up, crying. She's obviously very hurt. Her lawyer says that they are shocked by this verdict. But yes, there was, you may have heard it as they were speaking, there was a bit of hostility, crowds starting to gather, then over here, yelling, but the family has tried to, from what I can tell, kind of stay away from these crowds that have been gathering, and they're taking this moment to grieve.
Yeah, we did see that police squads were in the area, almost shielding some people who were on their knees on the street corner right outside the courthouse. So is there a large crowd gathered out there now?
Yeah, there is a large crowd here. We'll have Craig, our cameraman, pan over to that. These are among the number of people that have been following and have been kind of keeping tabs on what's happened since the verdict has been out here. As you can see, you know, it's maybe 20, 25 people. A lot of people are media members out here. So while there has been a little bit of hostility from one or two people, for the most part, it's really tame. It's just people trying to get their thoughts out after this verdict has been read.
Point taken. Thank you, Lindsay, for that.
Yes, thank you very much, Lindsay. We've heard from a number of parties. We've heard from the district attorney. We've heard from the mayor. We heard from the family of Slyville Smith. We haven't heard yet from the attorneys representing Dominique Heaggan Brown, Jonathan Smith, and Stephen Cohn. During closing arguments, Jonathan Smith wrapped things up by saying, hey, it really comes down to the prosecution believing it was excessive force. We believe that Dominique Heaggan Brown was acting in self-defense. Jonathan Smith saying, quote, officers have to make quick decisions in rapidly evolving situations. That's what happened here. 12 seconds. 12 seconds referring from the time that Dominique Heaggan Brown left his police car and chased Slyville Smith in between the two houses where the two shots were then fired. First shot causing injury, second shot causing death, happening between just under 2 seconds between each other.
Yeah, the reading of the verdict stopped momentarily. Quite unusual to see that happen in the courtroom, no doubt, because of the outburst in the gallery. Judge Jeffrey Conan stopping the proceedings, going behind closed doors, meeting in sidebar with the attorneys before proceeding, and ultimately deciding once the jury foreperson had read not guilty, it was not necessary to bring the jurors back in for individual polling. The state prosecutor in this case, the district attorney himself, John Chisholm, saying he agreed with that. There was no need to ask each individual member of the jury what they thought. The verdict was clear, not guilty.
Judge